How did an American Airlines plane and a Black Hawk helicopter end up in a tragic crash while the plane was attempting to land on runway 33? In the videos ahead, we'll take a closer look at the final hours leading up to the crash, the confusion between the PAT-25 VIP military helicopter and the air traffic controller, and how the rescue operation is being carried out. More details all in the video ahead. The plane had departed from Wichita Dwight D. Eisenhower National Airport in Kansas earlier that evening. A PSA Airlines aircraft, operated under American Airlines and identified as Flight AA5342, collided midair with a military Black Hawk helicopter at approximately 9 p.m. on Wednesday, January 29, 2025. The tragic incident occurred as the plane was making its final approach toward Reagan Washington National Airport in Arlington, Virginia. American Airlines confirmed that 64 people were aboard the jet, 60 passengers and 4 crew members, while 3 soldiers were aboard the military helicopter. This plane's radio transponder stopped transmitting about 2,400 feet, which is around 730 meters short of the runway, roughly over the middle of the river. This has marked the first major U.S. commercial crash in more than 15 years. From an aerial perspective, it is evident that Flight AA5342 was approaching the airport from the south, descending over the scenic Potomac River. This area is known for its proximity to several iconic landmarks, such as the Pentagon, located nearby in Pentagon City. To the north, one can spot the striking dome of the United States Capitol building, a symbol of American democracy. The Potomac River, which encircles the airport and much of Arlington, serves as a natural boundary and offers breathtaking views for arriving flights. However, this area is also densely trafficked, both by air and on the ground, adding to the complexity of air traffic management in the region. American Airlines Flight 5342, which we'll refer to as the landing flight, was on its final approach to runway 33. At this stage, called short final, the aircraft was mere moments from landing, flying at an altitude of about 400 feet. This is the most critical phase of landing, where every second counts and pilots are laser-focused on safely bringing the plane down. At the same time, an Army Black Hawk helicopter, identified as PAT-25, was reportedly on a possible training flight. It was flying perpendicular to the flight path of Flight 5342, following the course of the Potomac River. The Potomac River is a designated flight corridor for helicopters, and it's common to see aircraft like this operating in the area. The key difference between the two aircraft in this scenario was their operating rules. The Black Hawk helicopter PAT-25 was flying under visual flight rules. This means it was required to rely on visual observation of its surroundings to avoid other aircraft. The landing Flight 5342 was operating. How did an American Airlines plane give it priority over VFR flights in controlled airspace? This system assumes that VFR aircraft will actively maintain visual separation to avoid conflicts. Moments before the collision, the air traffic control tower at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport called PAT-25 to confirm whether they had the other aircraft in sight. PAT-25 responded that they did. At first glance, this seems like an acknowledgement that they were aware of Flight 5342's presence and were taking steps to avoid it. However, it now seems likely that PAT-25 had mistakenly identified a different aircraft, possibly a departing flight from the same airport, and believed that was the other aircraft referred to by the tower. Tragically, PAT-25 may not have realized that Flight 5342 was descending directly into its path. This misidentification could have led to the Black Hawk failing to adjust its course in time to avoid a collision. Although I'm not a pilot, this is what appears to have happened based on the available information. It's a heartbreaking incident that raises questions about how such misunderstandings can occur and what safety measures can prevent them in the future. If you have more insight or expertise, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. The passenger plane broke into multiple pieces and sank several feet into the river. Meanwhile, the helicopter ended up landing upside down on the water. Regarding the rescue mission, the main challenge is access. The water they're working in is about 8 feet deep, which is roughly 2.5 meters. On top of that, the conditions are tough. There's strong wind, chunks of ice floating around, which obstructs rescue workers. We also have audio from air traffic control that has been published online, capturing the moments as the two aircraft approach each other. In the recording, we can hear a conversation. It appears to involve the air traffic controller, with P standing for priority air transport, the helicopter, and CRJ referring to the passenger plane. The response seems to come from a helicopter, but something goes terribly wrong. The two aircraft continue to move closer to each other until they crash, and there was no response from the other side. This long-shot video, recorded by the Kennedy Center cam, seems to show two aircraft, a helicopter and a commercial airliner colliding, creating a huge flash. If you take a close-up shot, you can clearly see the Black Hawk helicopter traveling at an alarmingly high speed directly towards the plane, a moment of impending danger captured in stark detail. According to reports, the situation unfolded due to apparent confusion on the part of the Black Hawk pilot. He was seemingly unaware of the presence of a second aircraft in the vicinity, which ultimately led to a critical misjudgment. When the flight controller radioed in, asking if the pilot had identified Flight 5342, the pilot confidently confirmed that he had visual contact. However, the plane he was referring to, it was a completely different it wasn't Flight 5342, it was a completely different aircraft flying above his position. This misidentification proved costly. The pilot, certain he was operating safely, continued his course. Tragically, he ended up flying directly into the path of an oncoming aircraft. The sequence of events highlights the immense complexity and risks of aviation, where even small communication errors or lapses in situational awareness can lead to dangerous, life-threatening outcomes. Let's take a look at a different case scenario of a Jeju Air Flight 2216. This South Korean airline was granted permission to land from the south on runway 1 northward. But control tower cautions against bird activity, so the aircraft made a slight deviation in flight path. The pilot declares mayday after it hit a couple of birds, and it was instructed to make a go-around and land on runway 19 southward. It was at this moment the airplane encountered another problem with the landing gear, which did not open. Finally, the plane had to make a belly landing with what was supposedly a landing gear failure because it hit in the middle of the runway and crashed into the elevated localizer antenna and concrete, erupting into a huge fireball, while the tail section remained intact. Morning 8:57. A TC broadcasts a cautionary advisory about bird activity in the vicinity of the airport. 8:59. The pilot of Flight 7C2216 reports a bird strike, declares an emergency with repeated. This is what he said: Mayday, 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 calls and notifies a TC with the message: bird strike, go around. Just 1 minute after the bird strike at 9 o'clock. The flight initiates a go-around maneuver and requests authorization to land on runway 19, which requires an approach from the opposite end of the airport's single runway that is from the north to the south, which is not the actual landing procedure. Usually then land from the south to the north. 9:01 in the morning, ATC clears the aircraft to land on runway 19, 9:02 local time. The aircraft touches down on the runway approximately 1,200 meters, which translates to 3,940 feet from the threshold of the 2,800 meter. This is around 9,184-foot runway. 9:02 and 55 seconds later, the Airport Fire Rescue Unit completes the deployment of fire rescue equipment. 9:03 Flight 7C2216 overshoots the runway and crashes into a hill-like structure beyond the runway's end, which later on we came to know that it hit the localizer antenna and its adjacent concrete embankment. And finally, we have a missile attack plane crash.